I'm Randy Credico. This is Live on the Fly and Flashpoints. Here in a special edition, I'm sitting here with Flashpoints producer and host Dennis Bernstein from the Bay Area, Berkeley KPFA. And we are being joined now by a very special person, someone I've actually gotten to know the last 4 or 5 days with some very nice conversations over the phone, and that is the mother of Julian Assange, Christine Assange. Welcome to Live on the Fly Flashpoints, Mrs. Assange.
Thank you, Randy, and thanks for having me and running the program highlighting Julian's plight.
Well, I've been reluctant to ask you to be on the show. I always thought it was a good idea, but I've been reluctant because I know that, you are going through a lot. You haven't seen your son in a while, and I didn't want to exploit that, but, we kind of connected, and here you are. And I guess I should begin by saying, how long has it been since you've seen your son, Julian?
A number of years.
And you...
But we communicate.
Yes, you communicate, but it's not the same. He's so far away. It must be difficult. It's not like, he's not in prison, but it may as well be prison. So I know that for a mother to be separated from her son like this, it must be grueling and a difficult road to hoe on a daily basis.
It is. It's difficult for both of us and other members of the family, Randy. I don't think it's very hard to put into words this experience that we're going through over the last 7 years. I've been in periods where I've coped and periods I haven't. It tends to go up and down, as I guess Julian does as well. And it's very hard to communicate with your son when you know that every phone call that you're making, every text that you're sending is being listened to. You end up, or even every letter that you write, you end up that it's almost useless trying to communicate anything real.
Right. That must really take a toll. So you will not be, it'll be 5 years this coming Monday, 5 years. Can you believe he's been there for 5 years at this point in time?
No, the idea is horrifying to me, actually, that he particularly, we know that he's been detained 7 years without charge, but 5 of those have been in the Ecuadorian embassy, and we thank the people of Ecuador for their protection. But during those 5 years, Randy, the UK government and the Swedish government have refused all of Julian's requests for the normal 1 hour a day of life-giving fresh air, exercise and sunshine. It's a human right abuse of the grandest order. Anyone who's involved with refugee rights around the world should be highlighting this case. Here we are in a supposedly Western-free world, interning someone without charge and then denying them the rights that even people in third world prisons get, and including the right to have medical tests. He had a very bad shoulder with deep chronic pain for years, and they've even refused to allow him to have an MRI test.
Mrs. Assange, this is Dennis Bernstein here with Randy Credico. Let me just ask you this question. Do you remember the last time you were able to give your son a nice big hug?
Yes, 4 years ago.
Could you tell us what do you remember? Was
it 4 years ago? It's so taken up with all the fighting, Dennis. It's very hard to explain it. But it was when I left. I gave him a big hug when I left the last time. I was only over there for a few weeks. I've actually got a sick family member back here that I have to look after who was struggling with cancer. She's struggling with cancer and several years beforehand.
Could you talk a little?
But probably the best time I remember him is the one that the picture you've got on your show of me and him with his arm around me. that was when he'd just gotten out of prison, and I'd gone over there to campaign for that. And we were out in the snow at about 3 o'clock in the morning outside of the place that he was staying. And I was with an Australian television crew, and we were all Aussies together in that moment. And I was giving him a big hug, and they were cheering, and it was a really good moment, because it all feels so far away and so foreign, but for us all to be there together, and for me to hold Julian with his countrymen around giving support was a really good moment.
And could you talk a little bit, now that we've got Julian's mom on the phone, could you talk a little bit about sort of his first shinings, the first clue that he was going to be perhaps a interesting person, a troublemaker, somebody who was really interested in public affairs? Well, how do you remember that beginning?
Well, Julian, I don't think there was any one point at which it happened. Julian had always been an incredibly curious child. I'd always wanted to know why, wanted to know how things worked, and I actually encouraged that as a child. He, rather than if he would ask why something would work, rather than say, this is how it works, I would ask him, how do you think it works? And then we would, even as a little kid, explore theories at his age level about how something would work. And he was very turned on by all that. Later, and I also read him a lot of books. From the time he was a baby, he was read books every day, from fairy tales, Greek legends, and the adventure heroic classics, Tarzan, for example, where good was triumphing over evil, and there was heroic adventures. And the justice part of it was not through any form of ideology. It was just about through empathy and fairness in everyday life. So I think all those things together, and he came from a creative background. My husband and I were involved in the theatre. So all that was the background that enabled him to look at, to sort of explore justice and why and power to change. And at around, I can't remember what age it was, but specifically with WikiLeaks, then he wanted to know how the world worked. He wanted to be a physicist because he wanted to know how the world worked. He wanted to get to the bottom of it. And he went to University of Physics, and he was disappointed that most of the job opportunities were involved in working for the US government, in developing weapons, etc., surveillance. He wasn't very happy with that. And then the next thing I remember, he said, we were having a discussion about what would make the change in the world. We're talking about some of the ills of the world, and what, I asked him, what do you think would lead to a change? And he said, I think that there's only two possibilities for change. One is a cataclysmic event that would knock some sense into people because they have to re-look at their environment. Or the other one was technology. And I think WikiLeaks was the result of the technology that he saw would change the world.
And you said something very interesting. It wasn't about grand things, but fairness in everyday life. Can you think of like one of those everyday examples that sort of blossomed into the Julian Assange that we know in terms of his vision now for information? Well,
not anything specific in forms of day-to-day life, but just generally with people that we were dealing with within the family or neighbours. We wouldn't walk past somebody who was lying in the street, for example. If there was someone lying in the street, whether they were drunk or whether they were in a drug overdose or whether they were sick, we would stop and would ask them if they were all right. And Julian continued that. We were in a situation where we were helping some people involved in a justice situation, and Julian was right in their boots and all, defending people. I don't want to go into it, but it was to do with the court system. But also, you know that when he was a young teenager, he was very interested in computers. And so I bought him a computer, and he went exploring on it, and later on he joined up with some other young people. And as there's not a lot available in terms of challenging and adventuring in the suburbs, although we live just outside the city in the hills, it was sort of still a suburb, these young, very bright friends of his were challenging themselves on computers, and one of the ways they were doing it was to what they call look-see hack, which was they'd break in, they'd look at things, they wouldn't damage anything, just look in and then let people know, look, your system's insecure, we're just letting you know this. Now, during the process of doing that, I remember during the Gulf War that he got in and had a look, and he told me, he said, there's stuff going on here that's not right. There are people doing things that are not right here, and we're not being told about it. It's not coming out in the media that way. And I think that also galvanised him into his concept of WikiLeaks, which was basically a concept around really good media, and that is that the media hold the governments and corporations through investigative truth responsible to the people.
He has done an incredible job. We are much better off. We are more knowledgeable about our government's evil actions around the world. And obviously he's being penalized for that. And first of all, he's been vilified by these phony allegations. How did you react when these allegations came out of the Swedish government prosecutor's office?
Well, I remember the time very exactly. It was about 11 o'clock at night. I got a phone call, and the person didn't even introduce themselves. They just said, "Mrs. Assange, how does it feel to have your son charged with double..." Something was that. I think it was charged, but he wasn't charged, so it must have been an allegation of double rape. And straight from my solar plexus, I just said, he didn't do it, he's been fitted up. And because I know my son, and everyone says, oh, they know their son, but I know that Julian wouldn't do it. And but then I had to go through the whole process investigating the case, because to defend him, I had to know exactly what was going on. So like those who've defended him with knowledge, we had to trawl through all of the Swedish prosecution stuff to find out the basis of these allegations, and what we found was a complete and utter fit-up. And that was a horrifying feeling that your son would actually be set up on something as serious as a rape allegation, purely because he published the truth about corrupt power.
Right.
Dennis Bernstein here with Randy Credico, and we're speaking with Mrs. Assange, the mom of Julian Assange. We're speaking to her. Where exactly are you? You're in London at this point?
I'm in Australia.
Oh, you're in Australia. Okay,
I forgot to tell you, Dennis.
Thank you.
You're
very far away.
That secret.
You're very.
I'm an Aussie.
You're very far away, but you're very close to us here, and we're really appreciating the kinds of material that you're sharing about Julian Assange on this his fifth year of being held captive. Really, you have to say, by threats of the United States government, who has a special penchant for hurting whistleblowers. You know, I think of this this carpenter, this illiterate carpenter who used to walk around he actually fled from fascist Italy and ended up in fascist Argentina. And he used to spout these phrases, and one of the things that he used to say is, truth has few friends, and those few are suicides. Now, that's a very dark comment, but it does seem, if you think about Julian Assange or other great truth tellers who what was waiting for them was a jail cell or a bullet. Your thoughts on that? that courage that it takes to go
Well,
forward.
the original truth teller was Jesus Christ, wasn't he? And he was overthrowing the money changers at the temple, which is really, in 2000, fast forward 2000, and we've got defence contractors, the oil industry and Wall Street. And he said that you shall know the truth and it shall set you free. And nothing has really changed since then. We still have corrupt power consolidating itself and really destroying the world and not working on the behalf of people. And it sort of brings me back to what we should be doing as people. What do we do? Our leaders let us down again and again. They say they're going to do something and then they get in and fail. Now, they're either bad leaders who are having us on, or they're good leaders and they're under pressure themselves. And there's left and there's right and they're fighting each other and name-calling, but it's still not working, is it? So I see WikiLeaks as a uniting point for everybody, from the left and the right and everything in between, uniting around the First Amendment in what you would call in America, or just free press around the world, to hold our leaders in corporate and in the business world and the government accountable through transparency and truth. And good leaders are actually supported by WikiLeaks. Because if they are indeed under pressure from the deep state, for example, supposing we assume that Donald Trump is a good guy and he does want to, as he says, drain the swamp, which is the deep state, then he's going to need WikiLeaks, not just during the campaign where WikiLeaks was wonderful and he loved WikiLeaks, but even more so now, when the deep state is going to try to prevent his campaign. Now, if he is not in fact a good guy, but a bad guy all along, then of course he's going to want to suppress WikiLeaks. And our judgment of Donald Trump will, I think, very much hinge on whether he is willing to protect WikiLeaks and Julian.
We were, Mrs. Assange, we were just speaking with one of the attorneys, Jessalyn Radich, who has worked with Julian Assange, and we were talking about the message that might be being sent now by the very strong crackdown and arrest of the most recent whistleblower coming out of the National Security Agency. Does that give you pause or concern that Julian might have a tough row ahead?
I've always known he's going to have a tough row ahead. You only can look at the way they've treated their own whistleblowers, or as you say, their own CIA, NSA. They've not. The Obama administration had arrested and prosecuted more whistleblowers than all other presidents combined. So things are certainly not looking good, even before this change of administration. I'm not. You're talking about
Reality
winner.
Reality
yeah,
winner.
Look,
Was just yeah.
I'm not sure about where she's coming from, but even so, wherever she's coming from, the protocol should still be the same. I don't know about her case.
It's I'm sorry for interrupting.
If you are a whistleblower, there should be protections for you, and then it should be investigated and authenticated, and there should be a transparent legal process, and your rights should be protected during that time period. The reason I say I don't know where she's coming from is that we've been seeing so-called leaks about Russians and all the rest of it, and we know that they've been set up. That the Russians didn't hack the DNC. So I'm concerned that cohorts are using those, are now going to use leaks to. They're going to say that there are leaks, and they're not leaks. But because we don't know her motive, that's the reason why we need to protect all whistleblowers, including her, and they should go through due process, the same as any other citizen.
We know that Julian was pretty troubled by the way in which The Intercept blew their source in this context, and he seems to have been a lot more careful in his work in terms of protecting sources. I'm wondering if you noted that.
Oh, absolutely. I remember when WikiLeaks was being set up that Julian was saying to me, we're going to spend 2 years with the best minds in the world to create an anonymous Dropbox so that nobody can crack it, because we want to protect our sources. And we want people to feel so comfortable in leaking to us and not to be frightened that they're going to be revealed. And so he's kept to that, even to the detriment of his own life and liberty. WikiLeaks has never revealed a source. No source has ever been exposed via WikiLeaks. Chelsea Manning exposed herself on the internet, talking to Andrew Lamo. And very few other media have been willing to rise to that challenge. So it's best to leak to WikiLeaks if you're going to leak. It's a pity that it didn't leak to WikiLeaks.
Yes. I must say, it's Randy Credico again. We are talking with Christine Assange, who is in Australia, the mother of Julian Assange. You know, he really is a remarkable individual. You know, I am not a techie. He really knows all of this stuff really well. He's brilliant. Amazing to see him, and he's got a great sense of humor. He's got an incredible education. He's so well spoken. He's so dignified when he's on. Does it amaze you?
Yes. Well, yes and no, because I've grown. You know, he's grown up with me, and I've seen him, and he's always been a refined person. He's never been a crude person. He's been an honest person, and he's been an empathetic person, and he's always been very bright. So the morphing west to where he is on the world stage doesn't surprise you, but of course in another way it does. And I'm in awe of him as well, not in any kind of demigod way, but just as a human being with such resilience and courage, standing so strong in the truth, and taking the most incredible amount of attacks, not just from the government and corporations and behind it, what they're getting up to behind the scenes, but trolls. I mean, the thing that probably hurt me most in watching him stand up for his work was seeing other journalists, particularly UK journalists, trolling him on WikiLeaks with the most vile, immature, petty, vicious comments. I couldn't believe that this was coming out of the mouths of so-called journalists. And his resilience and ability to rise above it is quite awe-inspiring, isn't it?
And he continues on despite it all. That he certainly has a resolve and a focus that borderlines on superhuman. He has not been distracted from the work. In fact, he has managed to expand it. It's sort of a bit of a miracle.
Well, I think Julian's very grounded. His convictions come out of critical analysis. They don't come out of an easy path, which is jumping on some ideological bandwagon. So that when the going gets tough, he's grounded in where he's coming from because he's thought it through himself. And so he's not easily shaken from attacks, but from ideological attacks, for example, or personal attacks. I mean, I think they've called him every is there is, narcissist, racist, Marxist, capitalist, and on it goes on. But he knows that the reason he's doing this is about media truth and justice and government transparency, and he's grounded in that reality, and that's why he's not so easily shaken.
He is the most fearless individual. I mean, he's got the entire intelligence community, military community, not just here in the U.S., but in Britain, even your own government. What is your own government doing to protect one of their citizens under Turnbull, the Prime Minister?
Well, they've never done anything under any of them. the Labor government under Julia Gillard, called him, what he did was illegal and wanted to take his passport away, and she'd actually said that she was quite happy to hand him over to the US and changed our extradition laws specifically to make it easier for him to be handed over. Turnbull's the same. Look, basically, we don't have a real government here. We've got a puppet government. It's just a US puppet, and they're constantly auditioning for the US embassy for a place in the spotlight. Turnbull was an Prime Minister Turnbull of Australia was an ex-Goldman Sachs Director of Australia, and I think you're familiar with the term government sacks, where they get their people. Great big US bank gets its people into different governments around the world. We've got Tanya Plibersek, who's the deputy opposition member, who's flagging her credentials to take over from the current opposition leader, Bill Shorten, by coming out and stating publicly against Julian, if you wait long enough, the sexual assault charges will go away. Assange has got a lot to answer for. Well, for a start, he's never been charged with sexual assault, and that woman knows that she's lying, but she's waving to the US embassy, here I am, support me, I'll toe the line. And then you've got Gillian Triggs, the supposed head of the Human Rights Commission, who's just recently retired, who not once opened her mouth about the human rights abuses Julian was experiencing. And in fact, her office wrote a letter to someone that I know lying about the situation, saying he was charged when he wasn't, and he was avoiding charges, and he could have gone to Sweden, and he was avoiding interviews. All of that was lies. So basically, it would appear that in the Australian political landscape, if you want promotion, you flag your credentials that you're willing to toe the line on Assange with the US. That's where we're at in Australia.
And finally, we've got Julian's mom here, and I have to end this way. Forgive me, but Mom, but what are you most proud of in terms of your son? What part of his actions, his work, makes you the most proud as his mom?
That he's standing ethically in truth for justice with courage.
Yes. Mrs. Assange.
Before we go, I'd like to just...
No, you're not going yet. No, we're not going yet.
Okay.
I still have you here.
Yes, the fact that regardless of that he's willing to risk his life and liberty for his fellow man, basically. And that's what he's doing. He's risking his health, his liberty, and even his life, because we've heard all the horrible stuff coming out from various commentators about, illegally shoot the son of a bitch from Bob Beckel, the Democrat strategist, through to all the horrible things that Pompeo has said about him being a demon and a non-state intelligence actor, and nonsense stuff about him being involved in child pornography from both sides, trying to set him up with that. And I mean, most people would have fallen over by now. But I think that because Julian is standing for something that's good and right and correct, I think that's where he derives his strength.
He does have a lot of support, and I've been getting a lot of support from his supporters for this show on Twitter and social media. Now, what strategy? I know there's going to be a vigil at noon. We're going to try to get Emmy Butin, who's one of the leaders of that, in front of the Ecuadorian embassy at noon GMT time. What can people do you think, or what do you recommend people do to help out Julian?
Well, there's also another embassy in your country, in Seattle. Another vigil for Julian on Seattle on Sunday the 18th at Pike Market between 1 and 2. Some of the American supporters have been very busy lately They've organised a boycott UK, and it's under the hashtag boycott UK and also under the hashtag Free Assange Now. This is a very good idea because we all know that money makes the world go round. And in fact, one of the reasons there's a lot of opposition to Julian from greedy corporations is that he exposes things like some of the reasons for war, and that will reduce the profits from the defence contracting industry. So we also know that that's by reducing profits from major corporations, they will lean on governments to change their policy. So boycotting big UK businesses until they free Julian, all big businesses that are operating within the UK. So if you look up Boycott UK and Free Assange Now, both those hashtags on Twitter, you'll get more information about that. Another Californian supporter, just this week, has got up a campaign called $5 for 5 years. That's, that is about, look, he's been 5 years in the embassy, giving us the truth, fighting for us, for our right to know. How about we donate $5, $1 for each year that he spent there? And that will go to top up the Julian Assange Defence Fund, which is at justiceforassange.com.
That's justice with the number 4, Assange.com.
Yeah,
right.
.com, and you can donate your $5 there. That's just where the Defence Fund is. Also on that site is a lot of that's the best site in the world for finding out the facts about what's been happening to Julian over the last 7 years. And let me tell you, it reads like a born conspiracy. It's what the governments have been up to try to shut my son up is criminal and unbelievable. So just in America, just this last few weeks, American citizens have been standing up to fight. But look, generally what you're doing is also incredibly important, Randy. We find that when people are apprised of the facts about WikiLeaks and the facts about Julian, that most come on board to support him, and some even come on board as very active supporters. So getting out the facts, because there's an awful lot of propaganda and lies, once people know the facts, they are supporters. So that's also very important that people talk to each other about the facts, find out the facts. And there's a very good FAQ at justiceforassange.com. So getting out the facts is really important.
Well,
boycotting's very important, and funding Julian's defence and funding WikiLeaks is also important. We often feel very alone and powerless in the world at the moment, but we do have two things that we can still do. One is where we spend our consumer dollar. So it might only be $5, but if 1 billion people donate $5, that's really putting WikiLeaks and Julian in a strong position to fight off attacks. We also have our vote. Keep your politician on speed dial and yank his chain or her chain every so often and remind them that we actually pay their wages. And we expect them to stand up for truth and government accountability. We expect them to not get in bed with corruption. And we are not impressed with them persecuting truth-telling media. So they're just three things that you could do straight away. And, of course, you can always form your own Free Assange group. It can be a group of 1 or 2 or more. And this is what these ladies have done in America and around the world. Most people who form Free Assange groups are just ordinary people. They were not actually highly political people, often mothers who want to see the world protected for their children. And they often have no political experience, but a lot of heart and drive and creativity. And they often make the best advocates.
Well, Miss Christine Assange, I really appreciate you being a part of this show. You are welcome back anytime. You are really doing an incredible job on behalf of your son, who is a hero. And I would like to give you the last word if there's something you want to convey to Julian and his supporters there in London. I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, firstly, I would like to give my heartfelt thanks to all the supporters around the world who have stood up and fought to protect and defend WikiLeaks and Julian. Sometimes you've only done one action, sometimes you've stayed for longer. It doesn't matter. You did something, and this is why he's still safe. The people in London at the Ecuadorian embassy have just been troopers. There's both Ecuador and its embassy staff and the people of Ecuador and the people from the Julian Assange Defence and Wise Up Action and Emmy Butland. They have stood outside that embassy day in and day out in rain, hail, snow and sun to support my son and protect him. And at one stage when they tried to raid the embassy illegally and grab Julian, these people were his protectors. And I'd encourage anybody who's visiting London any time to drop into the embassy and stand outside the embassy and join this historic visit. And in particular on the 19th, if you're in London, you can catch the train to Knightsbridge Station on the Piccadilly line. It's at number 3 Hands Crescent. And just join the vigil there on the 19th in particular. Show Julian that you care. Show the powers that be that the people care and are not going away. WikiLeaks, after all, is supplied by the people with information for the people, for their protection. It's 100% funded by the people, and it's defended and protected by the people, including pro bono lawyers. This is a people's publisher, and it just goes to show you what the people can achieve when they get together, because WikiLeaks is rocking the halls of power, and they're terrified, and they have come back as bad as IS terrorists against the truth. But the people are standing firm. And to my son, I love you. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. I'm incredibly proud of your work. You're a terrific human being, and we're all standing here, and we will keep fighting until we get you out of there.
Okay, that is the last word. Thank you. And we'll see you folks next week. On behalf of Dennis Bernstein, Flashpoints, I'm Randy Credico, and thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Assange.